If your cell phone is the first thing you touch when you wake up, then chaos has already won before the day even begins. I know this because I used to be a slave to distractions, and only when I realized I was being consumed by empty stimuli did I understand the truth that Sada Yacco taught. A mind that is too busy never finds serenity. Today, I walk to recover my presence, and you will walk with me now. Stay with me until the end, because I will show you how to recover your attention and your life before everything is lost. When I realized my mind was being stolen, I remember exactly the moment everything changed. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was sitting on my bed with my phone in my hand, scrolling aimlessly through my feed, just letting the images pass before my eyes like a river of empty information. Suddenly, I stopped and realized that I had been there for 2 hours, and I couldn't remember a single thing I had seen. Nothing had stuck with me. Nothing had touched my soul. Nothing had added value to my existence. It was as if I had just woken up from a trance, and the only thing I felt was a strange emptiness in my chest and an inexplicable mental fatigue. It was at that moment that a terrifying question crossed my mind. Where was I for the last 120 minutes of my life? The most painful truth I had to face was that I could no longer be alone with my own thoughts. Every time there was a moment of silence, a second of boredom, a natural pause in my routine, my hand automatically reached for my phone as if it were an involuntary reflex. It was as if I had developed an allergy to emptiness, an inability to simply exist without external stimuli. I was afraid of silence because in silence I found myself, and perhaps I didn't want to face what was inside me. My phone became my shield, my escape, my socially acceptable drug that protected me from having to process real emotions, deep thoughts, or any kind of genuine self-knowledge. The scariest thing is that I didn't realize when it started. There wasn't a specific day when I woke up and decided to surrender my mind to social media and the endless stream of content. It was a gradual, almost imperceptible process, like a silent erosion that wears away a rock until it turns into sand. First, it was just checking messages in the morning. Then it became checking while eating breakfast. Then it became checking between each task at work. And finally, it became compulsively checking every 3 minutes, interrupting real conversations, precious moments with people I love, and especially interrupting my own ability to be present in my own life. My cell phone filled every empty second, every moment of waiting, every instant of potential contemplation. In the bank line, in the elevator, in the bathroom, before bed, upon waking, while waiting for the water to boil, while waiting for the light to turn green. Every microsecond of existence that could have been a moment of conscious breathing, of observing the world around me, of connecting with myself, was immediately filled with notifications, stories, short videos, and artificial dopamine. I had outsourced my ability to be present to a piece of glass and metal that promised to connect me with the world, but in reality was disconnecting me from the only thing that truly mattered, my own life happening in real time. And then I started noticing the physical symptoms of this addiction. My posture was ruined from looking down so much. My neck constantly ached. My eyes burned at the end of the day. But worse than the physical symptoms were the emotional ones. I constantly felt inadequate when comparing my life to the edited lives I saw on screens. I felt anxious seeing so much bad news. I felt envious seeing people seemingly living perfect lives. I felt angry reading aggressive comments. I felt desperate realizing how many hours I was wasting. It was as if I were injecting emotional poison directly into my veins several times a day and wondering why I felt so bad. Serenity isn't lost all at once. It doesn't disappear in a dramatic event or a conscious decision to relinquish inner peace. It's drained in tiny crumbs of dopamine, in microdoses of external validation, in stolen seconds that accumulate until they become hours, days, months, years of a life lived through a screen instead of through one's own eyes. And I realized I was emptying myself without noticing, like a glass with a tiny hole in the bottom that loses water drop by drop until you look and it's completely empty. My presence, my attention, my capacity to marvel at the real world, my inner peace, everything was being drained. And worst of all, I myself was holding the tool that was emptying me, thinking it was filling me. Anxiety created by my own hands. I thought my anxiety stemmed from life. I thought it was the stressful job, the piling up bills, the complicated relationships, the unmet expectations. I spent years blaming external circumstances for the constant knot in my stomach, the insomnia, the feeling of always chasing something without ever achieving it. I told myself and others, it's modern life, everyone lives like this, it's normal to always be anxious. But one day, when I finally stopped to honestly observe my patterns, I realized something terrifying. My anxiety didn't come from life. It came from the notifications. It came every time I unlocked my screen. It came from my own finger compulsively swiping to refresh my feeds. I was the architect of my own emotional prison. Every sound alert, every vibration in my pocket, every notification on the lock screen was an invitation to step outside myself. It was a violent interruption of my state of presence, an instant hijacking of my attention that ripped me from the present moment and threw me in thousands of different directions simultaneously. A message from work reminding me of a pending task, a post from a friend traveling to a paradisiacal place I can't visit, news about a catastrophe on the other side of the world, a funny video I feel obligated to watch so I don't miss out, a promotional email creating an artificial need to buy something I didn't even know existed. Each notification was a small stab in my peace, and I received hundreds of them a day. What I didn't realize was that my brain wasn't designed to process this absurd amount of contradictory stimuli in seconds. Evolutionarily, my ancestors dealt with perhaps a dozen significant events per day. I was trying to process hundreds of pieces of information per hour, each demanding a different emotional response. Laughter, sadness, anger, fear, envy, compassion. It was like trying to play 10 different songs at the same time and expecting harmony. The result wasn't harmony, it was cacophony. It was emotional chaos. It was pure anxiety, industrially manufactured and delivered directly to my pants pocket with my full permission and active participation. I started paying closer attention to my body. I noticed that every time I picked up my phone, my heart would race slightly even before I unlocked the screen. It was a response of anxious anticipation. What awaits me there? Do I have important messages? Did I miss something crucial? Is someone talking about me? My body entered a low-level alert state, like an animal sniffing out danger. But the danger wasn't real. It was a construct of my own information-addicted mind. And after checking, even when there was nothing important, I didn't feel relief. I felt an emptiness that could only be filled by checking again 10 minutes later. It was an endless, vicious cycle, an emotional hamster wheel where I ran faster and faster without getting anywhere. My chaos was self-constructed, brick by brick, notification by notification, scroll by scroll. There was no external villain forcing me to live this way. There was no one holding my head and forcing me to stare at the screen for 6, 8, 10 hours a day. I was doing this to myself, voluntarily, compulsively, even knowing at some deep level that I was hurting myself. It was as if I were drinking from a poisoned well, tasting the bitter flavor, recognizing the symptoms of intoxication, but continuing to drink because I couldn't imagine another source of hydration. My cell phone had become my only way to fill the void, even though it was precisely the thing that was creating the void in the first place. The most devastating part of this discovery was realizing how much time I had wasted blaming the world for my lack of peace. How many conversations I had about how life is stressful, how there's no time for anything, how anxiety is inevitable these days. How much money I spent on external solutions, therapies, medication, stress management courses, while the real source of the problem was right in the palm of my hand all along. The answer wasn't in learning to cope better with anxiety. The answer was in stopping creating unnecessary anxiety. It was in recognizing that I had the power to choose how many times a day I would let the outside world invade my inner world. And for the first time, I admitted the most liberating and terrifying truth. I was doing this to myself, which meant I also had the power to stop. The wisdom of Sada Yacco: control is not outside, it's within. Studying the life of Sada Yacco, the first Japanese actress to conquer the West in the early 20th century, I realized something that completely changed my perspective on power and presence. She didn't become an international legend because she was the most beautiful, the most talented, or the most privileged. In fact, She came from humble beginnings and faced a world that constantly tried to diminish and control her. But Sada Yacco had something that no external circumstance could take away from her: an unwavering center. She dominated stages in France, Germany, and the United States, not because she desperately sought audience approval, but because she was deeply self-centered. Her presence was magnetic precisely because she didn't need external validation to know who she was. And that's what made me question everything about how I was living my own life. I finally understood that when I seek external approval, when I need likes to feel valuable, when I depend on comments to validate my existence, when I measure my day by the number of notifications I received, I abandon my own center. It's as if I handed the reins of my self-esteem to thousands of strangers on the internet, allowing them to decide whether or not I was worthy of feeling good about myself. Every time I posted something and compulsively checked the response, I was essentially saying, "I don't know who I am or what my worth is until you tell me." It was a form of emotional slavery disguised as social connection, and I was living in this prison without even noticing the bars around me. Sada Yacco taught through her life that true power never comes from controlling others or being controlled by the opinions of others. Power comes from having such mastery over your own inner state that nothing external can destabilize you. When she stepped onto the stage, she wasn't asking for love. She was offering her art from a place of completeness. When she faced racist and sexist critics who tried to diminish her, she didn't engage in desperate arguments to prove her worth. She simply continued to excel until they had no choice but to acknowledge her greatness. She knew something I had completely forgotten. You can't control what people think of you, but you can totally control how you relate to those thoughts. And when you choose not to allow external opinions to determine your inner peace, you become unstoppable. I started applying this wisdom to my relationship with my cell phone and realized how much I had outsourced my sense of self-worth. Every photo I posted was a disguised question. Do you think I'm pretty? Interesting? Worthy of attention? Every status update was a veiled plea for validation. Does anyone care what I'm thinking? Every story shared was an attempt to prove that my life was worth living. I was constantly presenting myself for approval, like an insecure actress auditioning, never feeling good enough, always depending on applause to know if the performance was adequate. And the saddest part is that even when I received validation, it was never enough. It required increasingly larger doses to feel the same effect, like any addiction. And nothing is more expensive than losing myself. That was the real cost I paid for years without realizing it. It wasn't just the lost time, although that was significant. It wasn't just the wasted opportunities, although there were many. The true cost was that I had become a stranger to myself. I no longer knew what I truly thought about things, separate from what the algorithms showed me. I no longer knew what I genuinely liked, separate from what was trending. I no longer knew who I was when no one was looking, because I was never unwatched. The invisible audience of social media was always present in my mind, judging, evaluating, commenting. I had lost touch with my own inner voice because it was constantly being drowned out by the noise of millions of external voices. The lesson from Sada Yacco that changed everything for me was simple yet revolutionary. Stop asking the world who you are and start telling the world who you are. Stop searching outside for what can only be found within. Stop giving your power to people who don't even know your full name. When she stepped onto a stage in Paris, she didn't ask the French audience if her Japanese art was valid. She simply presented her art with such conviction that she created her own validation. And I realized I needed to do the same in my life. Stop seeking approval on screens and start building self-approval through actions aligned with my true values, not the values the internet told me I should have. Control was never outside, it was always inside. I just needed to stop voluntarily surrendering it. The hidden cost of digital procrastination. How many times have I said, just one more minute? How many times have I been about to start something important, something that truly mattered to my life, my dreams, my growth, and then thought, before I start, I'll just take a quick look at my phone. That just one more minute would turn into 10, then 20, then a whole hour evaporated without a trace. I told myself it was just a pause, a little rest before diving into the real work. But the truth I refused to admit was that it wasn't rest, it was escape. It was a sophisticated avoidance mechanism that protected me from having to face difficult tasks, uncomfortable conversations, or the deep work that required real concentration. My phone was my shield against the discomfort of genuine effort, and I was hiding behind it dozens of times a day. And how many lives did I lose in those minutes? I'm not speaking metaphorically. I'm literally talking about versions of my life that never existed because I chose scrolling instead of creating. The book I wanted to write but never started because I spent 3 hours a night watching random videos. The course I wanted to take but constantly postponed because I didn't have time, while I spent that non-existent time on endless feeds. The relationships I could have deepened with real conversations, but which remained superficial because I was only partially present, with part of my attention always focused on the screen. The skills I could have developed, the projects I could have completed, the person I could have become. All of that existed in a parallel universe where I made different choices with my minutes. When I postponed my real life to consume the lives of others, I abandoned my own destiny. That was the most painful truth I had to face. Every time I scrolled through Instagram, looking at photos of people living their lives while I postponed living mine, I was essentially choosing to be a spectator instead of a protagonist. I was choosing to watch the highlights of other people's journeys instead of building my own. And the most insidious thing is that it gave me a false sense of productivity and connection. I felt informed about what was happening in the world, updated on my friends' lives, engaged with trends and conversations. But in reality, I wasn't engaged with anything. I was just passively consuming, while my own life was on pause, waiting for me. Digital procrastination is as smooth as velvet and as destructive as acid. It doesn't scream, it doesn't attack you, it doesn't force you into anything. It just whispers gently, just one more video, just one more post, just one more update. It promises you'll start what matters right away, as soon as you finish checking just one more little thing. And because it's so smooth, because it doesn't hurt in the moment, because it doesn't leave immediate visible marks, we fall into it repeatedly without realizing the cumulative damage. It's like smoking. One cigarette won't kill you, but decades of cigarettes slowly destroy your lungs. 1 minute on your phone won't ruin your life, but years of stolen minutes accumulate and destroy your potential slowly, silently, until you look back and wonder where all the time went. I started doing the math, and the numbers were terrifying. If I spent an average of 5 hours a day on my phone, and data showed it was often more, that meant 35 hours a week, 140 hours a month, 1,680 hours a year. Almost 2 whole months of waking time every year spent scrolling through feeds, watching short videos, checking notifications. In a decade, that would be 16,800 hours. Almost 2 full years of my life dedicated to consuming content I didn't even remember the next day. 2 years I could have used to become fluent in 3 languages, or to master a musical instrument, or to build a business, or to write 10 books, or simply to be present in the precious moments that never come back. But the cost wasn't just temporal, it was existential. Every time I chose digital procrastination, I was reinforcing an identity. The person who doesn't follow through on their intentions, who doesn't finish what they start, who always has excuses but never gets results. I was training my brain to seek instant and easy gratification instead of deep and earned satisfaction. I was becoming someone I didn't respect, someone who talked about dreams but never woke up to realize them. And the worst part is that I knew it. At some deep level, every time I chose my phone instead of creating, a part of me whispered, "You're betraying yourself again." And this accumulated betrayal, day after day, month after month, year after year, wasn't just wasted time. It was wasted life. It was wasted potential. It was the slow death of who I could have been, suffocated by the person I was choosing to be with each scroll, each just one more minute, each other's lives consumed instead of living my own. My body is still. My mind is exhausted. I was always tired, even when doing nothing. I would wake up tired, spend the day tired, go to sleep exhausted, and wake up the next day even more drained. It was a type of fatigue that sleep didn't solve, that coffee didn't combat, that vacations didn't cure. I looked at my routine and was confused. After all, I wasn't doing heavy physical work. I wasn't running marathons. I wasn't lifting weights. Most of my day was spent sitting, often in the same position for hours. So why did I feel like I had climbed a mountain every day? Why did my body seem to carry tons of invisible weight? The answer came when I finally understood the difference between physical tiredness and mental exhaustion, and realized that I was suffering from a modern epidemic that no one talks about. Chronic cognitive fatigue caused by information overload. It was mental exhaustion, not physical. My body was sedentary, but my mind was running an endless marathon, 24/7. Every time I checked my phone, my brain had to process dozens of stimuli simultaneously. Vibrant colors, moving videos, attention-grabbing texts, background music, popping notifications. Each scroll required micro-decisions. Stop or continue, like or ignore, comment or just swipe, share or save. Every post I saw triggered some emotional response. Comparison, compassion, anger, joy, sadness. My brain was functioning like a computer processor trying to run 50 programs at the same time, overheating, crashing, but never truly shutting down. And I didn't understand why I felt so exhausted when all I did was relax on my phone. True rest doesn't come from stimulation. That was the revelation that changed everything. I thought I was resting when I lay on the couch and spent 2 hours on TikTok or Instagram. After all, my body was at rest, not making any effort. But rest isn't just the absence of physical movement, it's the absence of constant cognitive demand. It's giving the brain permission to slow down, to process, to simply exist without having to react to anything. Each 15-second video I watched seemed harmless, but to my brain, it was a new universe of information that needed to be processed, categorized, interpreted. Watching 200 videos in an hour wasn't rest. It was cognitive torture disguised as entertainment. It was like trying to rest in a nightclub with loud music, strobe lights, and people nudging you every 3 seconds. True rest comes from silence. It comes from staring at a wall without doing anything. It comes from sitting in a park and simply watching the trees move in the wind. It comes from taking a shower without music or podcasts in the background. It comes from eating a meal, paying attention only to the taste of the food. It comes from walking without headphones, listening only to the natural sounds around. It comes from lying in bed and simply breathing, without any screen to look at. But I had completely lost the ability to do any of these things. The idea of being 5 minutes without any external stimuli caused me immediate anxiety. I no longer knew how to exist in silence because I had forgotten that silence is not emptiness. It is the space where the mind can finally reorganize, process, and recover. And I never again found silence while my cell phone was nearby. Even when I wasn't actively using it, its mere presence in my pocket or on the table next to me created an underlying tension, a constant anticipation. What if someone is trying to contact me? What if something important is happening? What if I'm missing something? My brain kept a channel of attention always open to the cell phone, even when I tried to focus on something else. It was like trying to meditate in a room where someone could yell, "Fire!" at any moment. You can never completely relax because part of your consciousness is always on alert. The cell phone had become a permanent switch to my peace of mind, and I carried that switch with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I began to notice the physical signs of this mental exhaustion that I had ignored for so long. My temples ached constantly, as if my brain were literally swollen with information. My eyes burned and became dry from staring at bright screens. My jaw was always tense because I unconsciously ground my teeth while scrolling. My breathing was shallow and rapid, never deep and relaxed. My shoulders were always tense, raised almost to my ears in a permanent defensive posture. And the insomnia, the terrible insomnia of staring at my phone until minutes before trying to sleep and then spending hours with my mind racing, processing everything I had just consumed. My body was begging me to slow down, to switch off, to find true rest. But I was so addicted to the constant stimulation that I had forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely rested. Until I finally understood, I would never truly rest as long as I continued to confuse distraction with rest, entertainment with recovery, and digital noise with inner peace. The decision that changed my path. I needed to take responsibility for my own distraction. It wasn't easy to get to that point because it's much more comfortable to blame external forces than to look in the mirror and acknowledge that you are solely responsible for your situation. For years, I blamed Addictive algorithms, the designers who created these platforms to be irresistible, modern society that demands we are always connected, my job that forced me to answer messages at all hours. And yes, all of that is real and contributes to the problem. But the uncomfortable truth I had to accept was this: nobody was holding my head and forcing me to unlock my phone 150 times a day. Nobody was stopping me from turning off notifications, from leaving the device in another room, from setting healthy boundaries. I was doing it to myself, voluntarily, compulsively, and that realization was both devastating and liberating. I stopped blaming the world. I stopped complaining that everyone is glued to their phones as if that justified my own behavior. I stopped saying that it's impossible to live without being connected because I knew it wasn't true. It was just convenient to believe it. I stopped using my job as an excuse because when I was honest with myself, I realized that 90% of my time on my phone had nothing to do with work. It was pure procrastination, disguised as productivity. I stopped blaming the platforms for being addictive because, although that's true, I wasn't a passive victim. I had agency, I had a choice, and I was consciously choosing to return to them repeatedly, even knowing the effect they had on me. It was like stopping blaming the vodka bottle for alcoholism and finally acknowledging, I am the person who keeps opening the bottle, not even the apps. Stop demonizing Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as if they were evil entities with supernatural powers over me. They are tools. Very well-designed tools to capture attention, yes, but still tools that depend on my active participation to function. They didn't have real mind control over me. I had voluntarily surrendered that control, and at any time, I could reclaim it. This shift in perspective was crucial because while I saw the apps as all-powerful villains, I remained a powerless victim. But when I recognized that they were just tools I was using in a self-destructive way, I regained my sense of agency. I could uninstall, I could limit, I could set specific times. The power was always in my hands. I just pretended it wasn't. Not even people. I stopped blaming my friends for texting me, my family for wanting to share things with me, my boss for expecting replies. Nobody was forcing me to respond instantly. Nobody had told me I needed to be available 24/7. These were expectations. I had created myself by training the people around me to expect immediate responses. I had conditioned everyone to believe I would always be online, always available, always checking. And then I resented them for something I myself had taught them. The truth is, the important people in my life would perfectly understand if I responded in a few hours instead of a few seconds. And those who didn't understand perhaps weren't as important as I thought they were. The moment I said enough, I reclaimed my first piece of freedom. It was a Monday morning. Nothing special on the calendar, no significant milestones. I simply woke up, looked at my phone on the bedside table as I always did, and for the first time in years, I didn't reach for it. I felt the familiar urgency, the physical discomfort of not checking immediately, the anxiety whispering that something important might be happening. But I took a deep breath and said aloud to myself, enough. I'm not going to live like this anymore. It wasn't dramatic. There was no inspiring music playing in the background. It was just a simple choice in an ordinary moment. But that choice was the first domino to fall, which would start a chain reaction that would completely transform my life. Serenity requires choice, and I finally made my choice. I chose to wake up and not pick up my phone for at least an hour. I chose to turn off all notifications, all of them, and deal with the discomfort of not knowing instantly when something happened. I chose to leave my phone in another room when I was working on something important. I chose to establish a nighttime schedule, after which I wouldn't look at any screens anymore. I chose to delete apps that I knew were triggers for endless scrolling. Each of these choices was difficult. Each one came with anxiety, with FOMO, with the uncomfortable feeling of swimming against the current while everyone around me continued in the same direction. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life instead of being controlled by algorithms, notifications, and uncontrolled impulses. This feeling of regained autonomy, even if it caused discomfort, was more valuable than any content I could be consuming. I had finally chosen myself. The return to presence, the path of the Geisha. I learned from Sada Yacco that presence is power. Not the noisy power of shouting louder than others, not the violent power of forcing your will upon the world, but the silent and magnetic power of being so completely present that the people around you have no choice but to pay attention. When Sada Yacco was on stage, she didn't need to make exaggerated or dramatic movements to capture the entire audience. She was simply there, completely, totally, without any part of her consciousness wandering elsewhere. Her attention wasn't divided between the present moment and 1,000 other worries. She wasn't thinking about what people thought of her or what she would do after the performance or comparisons with other actresses. She was simply there, and this total presence was so rare, so powerful, that people were mesmerized. I realized that this was exactly the quality I had completely lost, the ability to be where my body was. Focus is a weapon. In a world where everyone is distracted, the person who can maintain deep focus for extended periods has an absolute competitive advantage. Sada Yacco trained for hours, days, years, perfecting every movement, every expression, every gesture. She wasn't checking messages between rehearsals. She wasn't scrolling through feeds when she had a free moment. She wasn't dividing her attention between 10 things simultaneously. She focused on one thing at a time with total intensity, and this singular ability to concentrate is what allowed her to reach levels of mastery that most people don't even dream of achieving. I began to realize that my inability to focus wasn't a permanent flaw in my personality. It was a skill atrophied by years of training in the opposite. I had spent years training distraction, multitasking, fragmented attention. Now I needed to relearn the ancient weapon of unwavering focus. Silence is discipline. Geishas didn't chatter incessantly, trying to fill every second of silence with empty words. They understood that silence had value, that pauses communicated as much as words, that knowing when not to speak was as important as knowing what to say. And this discipline of silence wasn't just external. It was primarily internal. It was the ability to silence the constant chatter of the mind, the mental noise that distracts us from being truly present. I realized I had completely lost this discipline. My mind was a noisy marketplace, 1,000 voices shouting simultaneously, each wanting attention, each pulling my consciousness in different directions. My cell phone only amplified this internal chaos, adding another 1,000 external voices to the already deafening chorus. Recovering silence, both external and internal, wouldn't be easy, but it would be essential. When I started living here again, in the now, without half my attention constantly slipping to the digital world, something extraordinary began to happen. Colors seemed more vivid. The flavors of food were more intense. Conversations with real people had a depth I had forgotten existed. I noticed details in the world around me that I had spent years ignoring, the way the afternoon. Light streams through the window, the sound of birds in the morning, the texture of my clothes on my skin. It was as if I had lived the last few years in low resolution, and suddenly everything was back in high definition. It wasn't that the world had changed. It was that I had started paying attention to it again. And this attention, this genuine presence in the present moment, was infinitely more satisfying than any content I could be consuming on a screen. My life slowed down. My mind breathed, and I realized that peace had always been with me. It wasn't something I needed to seek outside. It wasn't hidden away in some distant spiritual retreat or locked behind years of advanced meditation. Peace was here all along, patiently waiting for me, beneath all the layers of digital noise I had piled upon it. When I began to remove those layers, when I gave my nervous system permission to finally relax, when I stopped bombarding my brain with constant stimuli, the natural peace that had always existed within me began to emerge like water from a spring that had been blocked by years of accumulated debris. My breathing deepened. My shoulders slumped. The chronic tension in my jaw dissolved. The knot in my stomach began to unravel. I was finally coming home to myself. I just needed to turn off the noise to reconnect with her. It was as simple and yet as difficult as that. Simple because the solution was obvious. Put my phone aside, create barriers between myself and digital. Distractions. Establish sacred times of screen-free silence. Difficult because it required me to confront everything I had been running away from through these distractions. The boredom, the loneliness, the uncomfortable thoughts, the unprocessed emotions, the postponed dreams, the difficult conversations I needed to have with myself. My phone had been my anesthetic, my escape, my way of not feeling anything too deeply. Turning off this anesthetic meant feeling everything again, and at first it was overwhelming. But on the other side of this avalanche of feelings was something I hadn't experienced in years: authenticity. I was finally living my real life, instead of observing edited versions of other people's lives. I was building my own presence instead of seeking validation in digital presence. She was walking the same path that Sada Yacco had walked a century ago, the path back to herself, where true serenity had always resided.